We all know at a certain level that buying Air Jordans will not make us jump like Michael Jordan even today. And in fact, if we're really going to be honest with ourselves, we know that it probably won't make us jump any higher than we jump without Air Jordans. But people still buy them. Branded content and celebrity influencers, they work. Because if consumers feel more sympathetic toward a brand, if their products are promoted by a celebrity or someone they admire, they are more likely to have that connection. And this is global. The effect is the same in China as it is in the US. And for the group that most of us are so concerned about, that key 15 to 25 demographic, the people who are setting their behaviors for the rest of their lives, it is the most influential. So it's such a key topic. I'm so glad we're digging into it today. I'm Andrew Solmson. I'm the President of California for Wunderman Thompson. I always think President of California is kind of a funny title, governor having been taken. I don't know if this has existed since when Mexico owned California. But, when we at Wunderman Thompson, we created this brand, this agency, just earlier this year. It's a really new brand. And we did that by bringing together J. Walter Thompson and the kind of legacy creative there, Wunderman and the own data that Wunderman has really been at the forefront of, and then the groundbreaking digital of possible. And we talk about ourselves more than anything else as a customer experience agency, because the customer experience is that overall every single brand touch point that the customer feels. And sometimes I like to describe it simply as it's a way a brand shows how much they care. Because we all know what it's like to be with a brand that really cares about us, and we all know what it's like when they don't. So a big part of this customer experience is how do you connect with people emotionally? So having established that we are in no way in control of our decision making, I invite you to make an emotional connection with our awesome panelists, and I would love to ask them to introduce themselves.
Sure. Hi. I promise I'll sing out Louise. My name is Jennifer Fink, and I'm the Director of Digital and Social Media at Glow. We're a digital and social shop out of New York and really specialize in television and entertainment marketing. I've been there about 3.5 years, and I've worked with some amazing, huge conglomerate brands like HBO, Showtime, Hulu, TBS, VH1. But I would say the one that we've had the most success with when it comes to influencer marketing is IFC, which is a very niche comedy brand. And we are their agency of record, and I'm lead on the account. So we are focused on creating really an identity brand for IFC and then using all of the shows, the amazing shows that they have, Portlandia, Documentary Now, Brockmire, this really fun female sketch comedy show called Baroness Von Sketch Show, to really build out that narrative for fans and bring it to life on social. And we really worked really well with influencers who actually are creators for us, who aren't just putting content out there and sort of, promoting a trailer or promoting a scene lift from our shows. We work best with them when they're creating content that really adds value for our fan base. So yeah.
Cool. Hi, I'm Julia Moonves. I'm VP of Sales and Business Development at Pocketwatch. We're basically an entertainment studio for the modern kid, so we create global franchises out of digitally native stars and creators that are really loved by sort of the under 10 crowd. And what I really focus on is how do you safely and ethically but engagingly connect with a kid audience on the platforms where they're consuming a ton. So we work with everyone from Kraft Heinz and Kellogg's to Mattel and Hasbro, and yeah, that's the brief version of that.
Great. And my name's Hannah Taylor. I'm a partner. Thank you. Can you guys hear me now? My name's Hannah Taylor. I'm a partner in a law firm in New York called Frankfurt Kernet with a small LA presence. I'm an advertising lawyer with a specialty in social media, so my role on the panel is to discuss what's going on the legal side of all of this, because as many of you have heard, the Federal Trade Commission, which is sort of the part of the federal government that regulates national advertising, has taken an interest in this area, thinking that maybe it could be deceiving consumers. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today.
Cool.
So we have this really interesting mix, right? We've got, Jen focused on social media strategy for big brands and entertainment properties. We get Julia, who is really a content creator and working with many content creators, and we're going to talk in some depth. And then this incredibly important piece of influencer and celebrity marketing, which is what are you allowed to say, that Hannah represents. And I think anyone who spends time on social media knows this has changed a lot, and there has been a huge, huge furor over it. So I want to start digging in. Julia, I really want to kind of begin thinking about, I'm going to pick one of your clients, one of your partners, I should say, who is Ryan. Has anyone here ever heard of Ryan's World? Or sorry, do I have that right? Okay. Okay. So Ryan is an 8-year-old boy. He's the creative director of Ryan's World. And he has videos that have been seen in total over 30 billion times. Julia, we now live in a different world. Like, how do we get here?
I mean, I was trying to figure out a way to answer this question without using all of the terms, because it's really a convergence of technology. But I think it's a combination of, we now have platforms where you can put up content and a kid across the planet can see it. And we also have the ability for, Ryan's family is just a regular family. His mom's a teacher, his dad was an engineer, and they were able to make content of their kid just playing with toys for little to nothing. They filmed it on their phone and put it up on a free platform. So it's being able to sort of mix really easy to produce content on platforms that reach across the planet. And we found out that kids really like to watch other kids play and hang out with their parents and do fun science projects. And, that's not necessarily the content that major cable broadcasters were making. But between massive distribution and really easy to produce content, we found out that's kids' favorite stuff to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I really would recommend, because this has been really eye-opening for me, go and check out his channel after this, not during it, please. And,
you can go now if you want.
He has individual videos that have been seen 2 billion times, right? And when you look at the video, you're going to kind of think, I'm surprised. And I think Julia told me something that was really stuck in my head, where she's like, if you covered up the view count, it could just be like, your friend sending you a video of their kid playing. And you'd be like, yeah, it looks nice, looks like he's having fun.
Yep.
And then 2 billion views later, suddenly you've got an entertainment property on your hands. So I want to ask you, you talked about making sure it was done safely and ethically. Obviously, for you, and Hannah, this is a big part of your world as well, with kids programming and particularly kids videos being as popular as they are, what are the privacy concerns that we have to look at now, and how are those changing? Yeah,
do you want me to go?
Yeah, I would love for both of you to talk about it.
Yep. Okay, I'll start. I am not a lawyer, but the big thing that we're dealing with right now, the platform we work the most with is YouTube, which when it started was not designed to be a kids content platform. So their stance was always our users are 13 and above, and when there's users that are 13 and above, correct me if I'm wrong, there's different rules that apply in terms of how you collect data and how what you can know about your user, as opposed to if they're under 13, you basically shouldn't be collecting any data whatsoever.
Without verified parental consent.
There you go. And as you guys probably know, when your kids are on an iPad and with headphones on, they're not necessarily coming up to you and getting consent for everything they're consuming. So on January 1st of 2020, YouTube is becoming COPPA compliant, and that's the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So basically, the rules are changing around how you can advertise to kids, how you can track data about kid users on the platform, which is a really big deal because a majority of the ads on YouTube are interest-based, meaning they know something about the user, they know something about the viewer, and you can target them with advertising. And now for kids content, that's going to go away, which is a really good thing. Like, we don't want companies to know data about our kids. We don't want to target them with interest-based advertising. So it's a good thing, but it's really going to shake up the space because users create a lot of money from the ads that run on their videos. So making sure creators are prepared for the hit they're going to take and how to change how they do their business when, Google suddenly takes away a lot of their revenue.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Just from a legal perspective, and everything that was already discussed is exactly right. I think what I would add to that is that if you're working on a major platform like, Ryan or Evan
Yep.
do, you probably have to contend with what the platform is already thinking about, which is, are they themselves COPPA compliant, and you as a poster on that platform are sort of just following along with whatever the guidelines of the platform are. Where it becomes a bigger issue is if you are not on YouTube, but you have like native videos on your own website, or you are posting on a brand's site and then thinking about whether or not the brand's own site is COPPA compliant. In truth, I'm an advertising lawyer. We have a separate privacy team, so the world of privacy is quite complex, but you're exactly right that the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act does say that you can't target kids under 13 without verified parental consent, and how you actually get verified parental consent is pretty complicated. There are all these online mechanisms. You have to have, can't just have a sort of, someone send me an email and a kid can, write back and say, this is cool. There's a credit card that's involved. There's an unchecked box. There's, really a lot of steps that go into it. The other thing I would say, just from the legal perspective on the kids side, is that you obviously have to disclose in a different way if something is advertising, right? So we are in a different space in the kids world. We'll talk a little bit later about disclosures of making sure that people understand when someone has been paid to post something. When it comes to kids content, you
have to be very explicit. Like the first frame of the video says this is a paid advertisement, or this is an advertisement for the brand, because we want to make sure kids know when they're seeing an ad and that their parents know that they are seeing an ad.
Yeah, and I think much of the data shows that kids don't care, right?
Yeah, they are aware when it's properly disclosed, and they're like, look, it feels good, it's authentic.
It's still cool, right?
Yeah.
So, Julia is laughing at me because I did a similar panel to this last year, and I created this rule that made everyone hate me, which is none of the panelists were allowed to say authentic, because when you're just discussing influencer and celebrity, it's impossible not to say authentic 100 times. So today we're not gonna have that. So. Privacy and data privacy is massive. I mean, my company owns data on 265 million Americans, a crazy number of data points. I take that as both a huge responsibility and also a huge asset, and it's something that's got to be used really carefully. So, as we think about kids, but also beyond kids, we talked about COPPA. Talk a little bit, if you guys will, about CCPA and what's coming in January as far as different laws in California.
Yeah, so I'm actually not a privacy lawyer. I'm an advertising lawyer. So CCPA is not really my area of expertise. But just to give people a sort of really high-level overview of what's going to happen, there is a California-specific law. Again, I'm also a New York lawyer, so California is also not my jurisdiction.
But I say go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just talk off the cuff. CCPA is coming. Is going to be enforced in 2020, and it basically means that many of you probably know about the GDPR, which was the big sort of European Data Privacy Protection Act that came through. Basically said that consumers should have much more control over their data than they do now, right? So they should be able to affirmatively opt out of having you track them online. If you already own their data, they should be able to basically say, stop following me. And so California is going to have an increased sort of matching law to that. Part of the question is what the law is going to look like. We don't yet know. It's still being drafted. The rules are going back and forth with the Attorney General. So, one of the hard things in terms of counseling on it is that it's not set in stone yet. We don't know what the rules are going to be. But to the extent that this is an area in which you practice or you run a business that is California specific, even if you don't, because so many of the residents in the United States actually reside in California, that if you have any national touch, you're probably going to touch a California resident, you should at least talk to a lawyer about what's going on with the CCPA.
It sounds like you know like a lot, though. Even though you said you're a New Yorker, that sounds, yeah.
Yeah, Hannah, is what I love about her is she's always very careful to say, I want to be really explicit because I'm a lawyer, and I say, I'm a marketer, so I just say all
Right.
kinds of crazy stuff, and it's all totally fine.
Different brain.
So
Exactly.
Jen, of course, the data piece is so important, and the privacy piece is critical. And honestly, it's going to really change. I mean, we are finally seeing are lawmakers who I think for a long time just didn't understand what we were talking about and didn't have enough of a frame of reference and a mental model to even know how to legislate. They're starting to get serious about this, or at least they're saber rattling to get serious about this. Mark Zuckerberg's testimony seems to indicate that they are frustrated. But I want to take this back to the creative side of the business, because of course we've got to make sure this is all done within the proper restrictions. But can you talk about what it's like to work with your clients? How do you start out when you work with a client and they come to you? What's the starting place when you're starting a social strategy or a social campaign for them?
Sure. So we always start with what's the internal goal that they have? And then B, who is the audience they're trying to reach? And then from there, we're sort of figuring out, okay, from the audience and the goal, what are the right platforms that we should be talking on? And most of the time right now, that is purely Instagram. It's just where we're finding the most success. And as far as user growth goes, it's, the other platforms are kind of stagnant. So we're finding a lot of success with Instagram. And then, from there, we're building out, okay, what is the narrative that the show is telling on television? And then how do we want to extend that narrative in a way that fans are going to really want to see in world on social? And so we're choosing influencers and branded content or advertisers the ones we're working with from that point. What is the story that we're telling on television, and then how do we want to extend that to social, and how do we bring that to life with an influencer who's not just going to share out our trailer or share out a promo from our account, but how are they going to create a piece of content that is going to add value for the user and let them know that A, we get the show just as much as they do, and B, we're going to provide them with an experience they didn't expect. And we've had the most success with influencers who are actually creators themselves. So people like Ryan, somebody who is creating content on the regular, those are the types of influencers we like to work with. And those, that are micro influencers, we see a lot more success with. And that's purely because at this point, you can really buy followers and you can really buy a lot of the engagement. So what we're looking at really is sentiment. And how are their followers kind of reacting to the types of content they're creating, and how could we work together to create something that's interesting and different?
And I would just stop there to say just a quick legal point on that, which is that it's illegal to buy followers. So in addition to it being sort of, deceptive and poor practice and could anger a brand or a company like Glow looking to find real engagement, there's actually been a series of attorney general actions in the last year where against companies who are basic business model is to sell followers or likes for people looking to increase engagement. So definitely be careful there.
Have any big brands gotten in trouble for buying followers that you can tell us about?
No brands have gotten in trouble for buying followers, but the follower farms, as we call them, are the targets of the lawsuits. So there's a company called Devumi, Devum. I was just laughing, apparently well known in the industry, where I think it's less brands, because I think many brands have organic followings, but influencers looking to attract brand attention who maybe are trying to go from micro to macro will, and know that brands look at follower count as a metric in order to get hired, will purchase fake followers. And that has been something we haven't seen any enforcement against brands or any enforcement against influencers on this specific point. We have in other areas, and we'll talk about that later. But on fake followers, we've seen it against the farms themselves.
I really hope this does not affect my 50,000 Twitter bots that follow me.
It could.
Because that's a lot of my self-worth is wrapped up in that.
Uh-oh.
Is that how you're getting your brand deals
The
also?
validation is happening there.
This is a very bad day for me. Okay, so, Jen, you made a really strong point, and you said it pretty categorically and pretty casually, that Instagram really is the only place that you're focused right now. And, it just reminds me, like, the one constant that we see in social writ large, and certainly in any kind of branded content influencer, is change. And it was not so long ago that wasn't the case. So I would love to hear, like, anecdotally, why has it moved to really being Insta only, and what have you seen about the other platforms that just make them not worth the investment?
Well, I think, again, it isn't just Instagram. I think it depends on the type of show we're promoting. But we're finding most of our shows are promoting on Instagram. And I would say the main point of view there that I have is that Instagram has three platforms within one platform. They have the news feed, and that's somewhere that you can advertise. And then there's also stories where you could really tell more of a narrative and have fun with fans and kind of engage with them a little bit more. And then there's also IGTV, which is becoming its own sort of, video distribution platform similar to a YouTube. So there's a lot more to play with, and, we create specific strategies for each of these platforms within Instagram. So there's just so much more, there's so much more touch points to have. And then the other platforms that we're talking about are Twitter, right? And so for Twitter, it's really breaking through the noise of the politics and the news that's happening right now. And so I think people are kind of getting a little bit of content fatigue when they're going to Twitter. So I think when we can have, fun with them and play some like community management games, that's a great place to talk on Twitter. But when we're working with influencers or branded content, Instagram really is, our main bread and butter. So.
And Facebook hasn't even been uttered by you.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
what happened to Facebook, and is it still a place for particular demographics where you will focus, or is it really out of the conversation?
Facebook is more, we'll put video content up there and kind of let it live. But I would say Facebook groups are something we definitely look at for certain shows. But really, when it comes to Facebook groups, our strategy really is to set it up and kind of let the fans take it from there. I think when a brand gets too in the weeds in a group and is trying to sort of moderate it and figure it out, it's sort of like the model of brands coming into Reddit, where they're sort of feeling like, hey, this is our safe space here where we're going to talk, and we don't really want you to do that. So we are more giving moderators content for Facebook and allowing them to sort of, give something exclusive to fans in Facebook groups. But the days of the pages really being successful, for us at least, hasn't, it's kind of met its day. So.
Yeah, it's great to get that perspective. And then the one other I wanted to get your perspective on is Snapchat. Obviously, Snapchat for a long time had a lot of challenges about attribution and didn't know as much data about their users, and so had a little bit of a harder time getting the right message in front of the right person. They've talked a lot about how that's changed, and they're starting to be able to tell stories through some new ad models. Has that entered the conversation for you?
Yeah, I think there's two platforms I'm sort of keeping my eye on, just as far as, how we can tap into them. I would say not for an entire run of a campaign, but for specific touch points of a campaign. Snapchat and TikTok are the two that I'm really keeping my eye on. I would say Snapchat more for, the AR, VR experiences that we can create on their platform. And then TikTok is really the Gen Z generation is really paying attention to that, and there's a lot of challenges happening on TikTok that are really, really fun and, musical in nature. And so those are the two that I would say I'm keeping my eye on for specific activations, with influencers too. Because I think a brand coming into TikTok or a brand coming into Snapchat and kind of interrupting some of these one-to-one conversations that fans are having can seem a little, disjointed and sort of, kind of cringy. So we're really being careful about hopping into those platforms in a authentic way.
Nailed it. So, you talked about how when people are coming to you, and for both you and for Julia, oftentimes partners or clients, particularly or brands, will come in and they'll say, TikTok's hot. I want to do a TikTok. Make me a TikTok, right? And because this, and I wish I was totally kidding, but I'm not, right? This is how it happens. Someone will say, I want to do a VR. Can you guys make me a VR? Can you make it viral, right? So, like, what do you do when someone comes in and says, I want to lead with that? And what are the pitfalls of that?
I don't know where you start, Julia, but I kind of always start with data. And sort of telling them, here's the demographic that's on the platform. Here's the things that they're caring about on the platform. What do we uniquely have to offer that is going to add value to them on the platform that they're not seeing right now? And sort of then also coming up with, a solution for which we could hit on the goal that they're asking us to hit on, outside of just make something viral for us, and telling them the right way to do it. And then, experimenting on that platform when it is for the right show or for the right demo. So.
Yeah, I'd say it's always a red flag for us when someone wants us to make something viral for them. It's not really what no one can promise you that, first of all, unless it's a platform that's just going to buy views behind something. So we always sort of talk them through, look, you're working with us, Tabumi. We always talk them through, like, look, you're coming to us to work with creators that have a very specific audience and a very engaged audience, and let's work with you again, on your goals. What do you want to get out of it? But the main reason you should be working with us is how to connect with these specific consumers, as opposed to making something that's going to land on the front page or something like that. If you want to do that, you can make it yourself for cheaper and then just buy the exposure on the platform. You can buy front page from any of these platforms. So it's working with the creators to really connect with their audience, get long engagement, long watch times, all of those sorts of things, as opposed to just seeing a view count get really high.
Right.
So, Hannah, I think you need to be part of every panel, and what I want to get you is just a buzzer where you can just be like, illegal.
Illegal.
Right?
Illegal.
Because,
That sounds so gratifying. I'd love to.
I would also like, or maybe like a light you could just turn on. Illegal. So, Hannah, when you talk about the rules and the people who run afoul of them, you've said to me before, the devil's in the details. So, what do you mean by that, and how do people tend to get in trouble?
Okay, great question. So just to kind of give you the 35,000 feet in case this is not an area that you pay attention to very closely. A long time ago, many people think that this is new law, but actually it's old law. Since 1920, the Federal Trade Commission has basically said that if you are advertising to somebody and they don't understand that they're being advertised to, that's deceptive, and the rule is you have to disclose to them that what they are seeing is an advertisement. What's new is that we now have this thing that we all work in called influencer marketing, where old law gets applied to new business tactics and new facts. So what happened in 2017 was this sort of old law and a piece of guidance called the endorsement guides, which is the Federal Trade Commission's sort of thinking on this area of the law, which you can all read and is very user-friendly. It's not written in legalese. It's really clear. All of that was updated in 2017 by the Federal Trade Commission to basically address our industry and what to do with the fact that so many people were now posting on social media because they'd either been paid, or it's not always payments. Sometimes it's sent free products, sent toys, or it's because they're the wife of the CEO of the company, or it's because they have some other relationship, which is what the law calls a material connection. And because of that, the FTC updated their guidance and said, once again, we reiterate, it has to be clear, even in social media, that if somebody has a material connection to a company and they're posting on the company's behalf, giving an endorsement of the company, it's been clear that they've been paid or given something of value. Now, what Andrew's referencing is that the devil's in the details. I think many people thought at the beginning of this industry, okay, well, how do we do that? Because we have these really short character counts or these really small spaces, and we want to make sure that we're doing it clearly, but we're not really sure what the FTC or state regulators are telling us to do. After so many years of sort of regulatory enforcement, we have some guidance. So, and the FTC just put out a really clear, very basic set of rules where they've sort of synthesized all of their guidance into one clear document. So if you want to Google that, that's available, is really helpful. But I'll just tell you kind of high level. You can use a hashtag if you want. Many of you have seen hashtag ad, right, used. That's fine if what's really happening is that somebody's posting an ad for you. You can also use hashtag sponsored. The FTC has said no to hashtag spawn. Many people were shortening sponsored as a way to kind of save character counts or to get cute. The FTC said nobody has any idea what spawn means. Please stop using that. Also no hashtag SP, which was also meant to shorten for sponsored. That's a no. People were often saying hashtag thanks for receipt of free product. The FTC came out in 2017 and said that's not sufficient because you could just be seen as a satisfied consumer or be happy with the fact that a brand came out with a certain product or is excited about something. It has to be explicit that it's thanks for something free, not just thanks. Also, people were using hashtag partner. The FTC said no to that. It has to be hashtag brand name in conjunction with partner so that it's clear that you are a partner of the brand, not just that you're a hashtag partner. And then probably the most, you can, before I move on to placement, one of the other things you can do is you don't have to use the hashtag at all. You can use what we would call an organic disclosure, another, much like authentic, another horribly overused word in this space, which basically would just tell the story using words. Like, I'm so excited to be partnering with Mattel on this amazing new program. According to the FTC, that's a very clear disclosure that you are in a relationship or have, or thanks so much to Mattel for these free toys would also work. The hashtag is not required. They're just saying that you can use the hashtag if that's the way that you'd like to disclose.
Yeah, for kids, we also, I forget if it's an obligation or a recommendation, but we always do this. We do the verbal disclosure because also our audience can't necessarily read.
It's a requirement.
Yeah, so that's why we do it. But yeah, so the idea of putting hashtag sponsored for an ad that will probably run at least somewhat in front of kids is not enough because, again, we need to make sure that they know that this is an advertisement.
And she's making a really, really clear point, which is about where that disclosure goes, right? So we've talked a little bit about the language, but we also have to think about where you place it. So one of the main ways that people have gotten in trouble is they've put it somewhere where people can't see. So you might have hashtag ad, which is fine and a great disclosure, and we've all agreed works, but you may have put it way down in the caption, right? It's the last hashtag. And so someone has to click the more button on Instagram or the more button on YouTube, and they have to scroll way down to see hashtag ad. Warner Brothers got in trouble in, I think, about 2015 for doing exactly this. They ran a big campaign for the release of their new video game, Shadows of Mordor. They had influencers go out and post on YouTube video gameplay of using the new game. And one of the influencers had a disclosure that his post was sponsored by Warner Brothers, but the disclosure on YouTube was way down. You had to really look for it, scroll in the video description. And unfortunately, these facts, you can't make these facts up. In the description, he said, this video is sponsored by Warner Brothers, but nobody ever reads this far down. Yeah. And then he said, what are you doing snooping around? So that was just an invitation to the regulators to say, oh, we're reading, and that created a major lawsuit.
Snooping around is their job.
Exactly, snooping around is their job. And it was like bait for them, right, to say, well, you're exactly right, no one is looking that far down. So it's very important to not only put it somewhere. The FTC has recently said in the first 2 lines of an Instagram post, anywhere before someone has to expand. And then when it comes to children or in video content or in an Instagram story, many people listen to it with their sound off. So something on the screen so people really can't miss it.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is becoming a huge issue.
Yes.
What it makes me think is, could Instagram make a tiny change, having gone from 3 lines to 2 lines, and suddenly millions of posts are out of compliance?
Yes. So we had this exact issue come up over the last year. I was working, representing a client before the Federal Trade Commission on an issue with their influencer program, and they were complaining to us about thousands of posts that they thought were non-compliant, given the fact that they thought the disclosure was too low in the post. And we were looking at it on our side, and we were saying, they're fine. We don't understand what the issue is. And it was only after we came to realize what the discrepancy was that we realized that every person's phone basically sees things differently. If you've already interacted with the post and you've already pressed more, the next time that you look at the post, it will show up fully expanded. Or your iOS is different from your neighbor's iOS, or your phone is different, or your screen size is different, or your font is different. There's so many different variabilities that it's very difficult to be able to tell exactly where in the post the disclosure will fall. I think the FTC's position is probably that the safest way to stop that variability is to put the hashtag first. I know many marketers that's very cringeworthy to many marketers, but they have said they think the first 2 lines will stop most of that variability. It will be seen by most consumers, and they're comfortable with that.
Can you tell us about some brands that have, never your clients, of course, because you
Never
take
my
good care of
clients,
them.
of course, right.
Tell us about some brands who've really messed up and gotten in trouble.
Yes, so we talked about Warner Brothers. Another sort of really famous one was Lord & Taylor. This also happened around the same time, around 2015, where Lord & Taylor paid hundreds of influencers. They were releasing a new dress. And they paid hundreds of influencers to post pictures of themselves wearing the same dress. And the best fact to me, which I think is hysterical, is the internet consumers are smart, right? So the internet went crazy. Reddit went crazy. They're like, why is everybody in the same dress? What is going on? You know, like, what is happening here? Because none of the posts that Lord & Taylor paid for, or any of these influencers, disclosed that it had been paid for by Lord & Taylor. So all of it looked like authentic influencer content. And it looked like all these people were just wearing the same dress. The FTC sued Lord & Taylor, brought a complaint against Lord & Taylor, saying that their failure to have influencers disclose was illegal and a violation of Section 5. And Lord & Taylor settled. The hard thing about what happens in these settlements is even if there's not an exchange of money, what happens is that the FTC then has the ability to monitor your brand and all of its advertising for sometimes up to 20 years.
Wow.
So if you think about like the competitive disadvantage of being under an FTC enforcement decree as opposed to your competitor, where you're worried that at any time the government can look at what you're doing and sue you for, for damages for any non-compliance, you're not going to, all the risk that you're willing to take goes out the window because.
This is why we listen to our lawyers.
Hopefully.
So, Jen, I want to ask you, like if when we turn, so let's say you've got everything compliant, it's all above board. You are in one of the most difficult parts of the space, which is you're trying to drive viewership to shows. And obviously, shows now appear in lots of different places. Yesterday, Disney Plus launched. My favorite comment on that was, I think Stephen Colbert tweeted that his favorite show so far on Disney Plus is buffering. They had a few technology issues. So here's the real question. It's basically impossible to measure from an influencer campaign how many people or whether people tuned in because of it. So with the work that you do, how do you know if you're doing a good job?
Well, I think I have a specific example I can bring up, but I think for us, it's really about what the fans are saying on social. And if they're saying that, the social account is just as good as the TV show and really brings them an entertainment experience, like that is what we live for. That's what I put up on my fridge every day. We do have, certain clients that are coming to us going, okay, we want tune in for the finale, and how could we do that in a way that's interesting and can kind of give back to the fans? So we had a specific experience with VH1 for 2 seasons ago for America's Next Top Model, where they came to us and sort of said, we want to give the fans an amazing experience, but we also want to push tune in for finale, and how can we bring the two together in a way that's really interesting and fun? So we had been doing these really fun, gamified Facebook Lives every week and corresponding with the episodes. And so in doing those experiments with the lives, we kind of learned a lot about what the audience wanted. And what they wanted really was to give their opinion and to be heard and to be judges themselves for the show and be the panelists. So we created the first ever Facebook Live fan photo shoot and hired, fan favorite models throughout the season, even ones that weren't in the finale, and partnered with Drew Elliott from Paper Magazine to sort of really bring it all to life. And he was one of the panelists at the time, one of the judges. And so we allowed the fans to sort of become influencers even for us and create content with us, in the sense that they were choosing everything the models were wearing live. They were choosing every, pose they were making within the photo shoot live and voting. And then the way we tied it to finale was, they could also vote on who won the photo shoot. And we didn't reveal who won that Facebook Live fan photo shoot the day of the finale until the actual finale aired in a bumper that night. So we sort of brought to life, influencers from the show, and then, allowing our audience to create content with us, B, the learnings that we had from the entire season up until that point, and then C, the network's goal, which was how do we push tune in, and we made it about the fans and allowed them to make a decision and then see that decision come to life during the finale. So
That's really impressive.
Yeah, it's really cool.
yeah, it was very fun.
And it's, it's kind of meta, but thinking about the fact that when people are saying, yeah, the social is as entertaining as the show, right? It starts to really kind of show where people's attention are, and and what they care about and what they consider content.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so hard for me not to think about Julia and Jen. You guys are both trying to drive people to watch with these incredibly different demographics. And Julia, one question I have for you is, Pocketwatch, you've been so successful. You've got this great stable of partners. who drive all of this massive watching behavior. So what's the future for you? Will you be aging up with them as they move into being the kind of consumers that currently Jen's looking at trying to attract? Do you stay in kids content? Like, what's the future for the business?
I think for Pocketwatch, I would think of us, similar to a Nickelodeon, where our core is always going to be kid, and we may, skew down with, a slightly younger brand and a slightly tween-targeted brand. But for Pocketwatch, it'll really be kids. And I think some of our creators are also thinking about that. Like Ryan's family has a whole animated universe that they've created, so that the idea is that Ryan's world can live on for years and years and years, and it won't rely on Ryan still wanting to make videos, because the only reason Ryan's still making videos is because Ryan wants to, which is great. And that's the first thing we think about when we're partnering with someone. Like, are the parents good people? Are the kids happy? All that sort of stuff. But his parents have also done a really good job of creating this animated world. He's got Combo Panda, which is a gaming animated panda that plays video games. Gus the Gummy Gator, who is an alligator that really likes gummy bears. So the idea is, as Ryan grows up and maybe doesn't want to do this anymore, there's still this stronger brand and universe that can continue to grow, still targeting kids and not necessarily, Ryan starting to do Gillette commercials or anything like that. I mean, if he wants to, go for it. I just won't be selling it. But.
That I'm looking forward to. So, when you often talk about how different the habits of kids are, but it is such an important way that we're setting the behaviors for going forward. So often you talk about the kids picking the smaller, worse screen in terms of what they see, viewing and sound, over, sometimes in the same room as a bigger screen. Why do you see that overwhelming behavior, and are we seeing that across properties for you as well, Jen?
Mm-hmm.
I think for us, what we've found through just sort of anecdotally and then more recent research that's come out is the thing that is most appealing to kids about the small device is the control, the level of agency that they don't really have anywhere else in their life. So it's literally deciding what part of the video you're going to watch. Anybody that has kids or nieces or nephews knows you may be stuck watching Bonjour from Beauty and the Beast 10 times in a row because that's the part they want to keep watching. So it's the idea of, I have this device, I can control it, I can decide what I'm watching, when I'm watching. And so, yes, it's a smaller screen, but it's so much more than the TV that mom or dad puts on, decides what you're watching for at least the next 15 minutes at minimum sort of thing. So it's really that level of agency and control that they like. And I think, we're seeing kids move somewhat towards like OTT offerings. So, if you've got a TV with every sort of app that your iPad has on it, there's more migration towards the big screen. But yeah, for the most part, it's really being able to control what you're watching, when you're watching, how you're watching it.
Is it the same thing for big
Totally.
kids like us?
It's the same thing for big kids like us. I think, you kind of hit on this in the last sentence that you said, but I think it's a matter of being able to go from screen to screen no matter where you are and being able to pick up from where you left off. And I think that's what people are expecting, and I think that's the offering that we're seeing works the best. And then for me on the social side, it's more about, fans creating content with us versus us just putting content out for them. And so that's why that Facebook, live finale works so well, but also, things that we're doing across platforms is asking them what they want, asking them for their opinion, asking them to join in with us on creating content for their favorite shows and really creating that community together. So.
We often, I hear our strategists often say there are riches and niches. And when I think about how influencer and celebrity content has changed, even in the short time it's really been a thing, it has gone from these kind of broad-based, the Bethany Motas, the Kim Kardashians, the people who the draw was, they've got 25 million or 60 million or whatever the number is of people who are going to watch this. I never hear about that anymore from brands, right? They're like, those people are too expensive. It's just totally scattershot. It's, buying national TV, and I don't really do that so much because that's not what my people are interested in. They're interested in feeling targeted. So if you think about how much things have changed, I would love to hear from each of you, where do you see it going? What's next for branded content and celebrity marketing? And how do you see it changing, and what should people in the audience be looking out for?
I would say for entertainment, it's really creating in real life experiences with influencers that can then live on through social. And so for us, like what I would look out for is, following the brands that kind of understand that piece and want to see an influencer that isn't just putting stuff out there that they're giving them, but creating that experience together. So like, I think that's really the future. And then outside of that, influencers that are creators that are creating AR and VR experiences. How are we bringing out of home creative to life, and how are influencers sort of helping us with that piece? And where is the space going to go from there? Maybe it's bringing to life the IRL, the AR, VR, and social all together in one big ecosystem.
And can you tell us, are there brands that, when you think about brands to follow, brands that really get it, are there any out there, whether they're clients or not, that you would really recommend people look at?
I think HBO is doing a really great job. I think the stuff they're doing with Watchmen is really interesting. I would say other brands that are kind of, nailing it. I think this isn't entertainment, but I think Nike does a really great job. They sort of know their ethos and they bring in the right influencers for them, and they also touch on different niches of demographics, and people are really connected to them in that way.
Thank you. Julia, what do you think?
I think ironically, at least for the kids space, it's starting to look almost more like traditional media, especially as we reduce the amount of data that we don't collect any, but the amount of data that you can collect on a user. It's moving towards sort of contextual advertising for kids on these platforms where you're running in front of Ryan's channel or EvanTube's channel as opposed to videos about dinosaurs, because your user's interested in dinosaurs. So I think it's sort of learning that for kids, the new normal is YouTube and platforms like this. So the content is going to look very similar to what you're seeing on Ryan's channels as opposed to what you see on broadcast television. So I think it's just sort of getting used to that. The one stat that I'll throw out, because I can't not, is we now know the number of unique viewers on YouTube channels, and Ryan's channel has more unique viewers on his YouTube channel in the US than Nickelodeon or Disney Channel on their broadcast cable networks. So
Wow.
yeah, he does over 1 billion views total a month. I think 83 million uniques in the US in a month. So it's sort of realizing that this is what kids are watching. This is where it's going.
Yeah, anybody with kids knows this. Hannah, what do you think? Where are we going?
I would say that, technology is a hare and the law is a tortoise. So what we're often trying to do, not to use an Aesop's fable analogy, but what we're often trying to do is to, scramble to apply old law to what you guys are all thinking about and creating. The thing that I would say is that the FTC's position is that just because the medium changes and the medium doesn't lend itself well to good transparency does not mean that the rules don't apply. It means you shouldn't use the medium. So when everyone came out and said, Twitter only has 140 characters, they said, don't use Twitter. Not that that's a practical solution, but it's really important to think as the world moves forward, we now have CGI influencers, right? People that are not real humans who actually promote products and are hired by brands like Chanel to promote products. From my perspective, that's an exciting technological development, but it raises real transparency issues for how do people know that's a robot, not a real person? Can she really love her new purse if she can't love anything because she's a robot, which is a legal requirement? I'm 100% serious. This is where we are, right? If she's promoting a lipstick, how do I know that that's the experience that the average woman is going to get wearing the lipstick, because the lipstick wasn't actually applied to her because is a digitally enhanced photograph, which is technically illegal. So all these things are things that all old law is getting applied to new technology. And I think as we all start to create this interesting stuff, it's my job to sort of scramble to figure out how all these old rules are going to apply to the new cool stuff.
That sounds like hard work. So I'm going to go to the audience for questions in a second. One of the things I want to lobby Digital Hollywood to do in the future is to put a little bingo board in your program. So for those who had authentic, organic AR and VR, that's great. Unfortunately, if you had blockchain, crypto, or cannabis, we did not mention those on this panel. You will not be able to claim bingo.
Yeah, next time.
So let me ask if there are any questions for our panelists. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, a great question. I can't speak to necessarily what platforms like YouTube or Instagram are doing as far as that goes. I can tell you for Pocketwatch, it's very much about, we only partner with a handful of creators, meaning 5 to 10 total, and it's about reviewing all of their content. They all have multi-year track records of making safe and family-friendly content that you can sort of stand behind. But it's a big challenge for a platform like YouTube, where your kid, if they're not on, YouTube does have YouTube Kids, which in theory you can have your kids watch, but sort of a big complaint is that nobody's really watching it compared to the main platform. And that's a big challenge for parents, because you can be on a safe, family-friendly video and 20 minutes later your kid's gone on the rabbit hole. So there's certain parental controls you can put on those platforms and things like that, but in terms of like a content rating system, there's nothing that I know about. I don't know if you guys know about any of that, but not yet.
No, I would agree. The only thing I would add is that the platforms themselves make very clear in their terms of service that they're meant for kids 13 and up. So a way that they sort of legally protect themselves is that in YouTube Kids might have a different demographic, but
Yep.
13 and up is the age that's allegedly appropriate for people that are on those sites. So to the extent that they're underage users, their theory is that's not who's supposed to be watching content.
There's a question in the front.
I didn't have much time, but the preview or the gold nugget and the rainbow. I'm glad the other two panelists did not show up. You got three more for me. Hannah, you were just talking about CGI influencers. Isn't that really, objectively, I'm just asking this question, isn't that really deceptive then? You've got a robot that's role modeling that it likes this or that. It's not real. I'll just wait for it. It's not real. It's deceptive, isn't it?
Yeah, so did everyone hear the question? So just to repeat it, she asked whether or not it's sort of per se deceptive to have a CGI influencer, because as I was saying before, how do we know whether or not she can like something or, really wear whatever it is that she's wearing? And I guess I would say, not to give the ultimate lawyer answer, but it depends. If she's just in a picture, in a post for Chanel, and she says, "Hi, I'm Shudu, your virtual CGI influencer, here to talk about Chanel," I don't think there's any deception if all she is doing is photographed with a bag. To me, that's very different than saying, "Look at how the new lipstick will look on you," or "Look at how the new lipstick looks on me," or I've really been loving this new skincare cream, right? So I think it's always the devil's in the details, but it really comes down to what the claim is and whether or not people can tell she's a robot, and whether or not the takeaway is something that's impossible to substantiate.
I will also point out, many, many times when a celebrity is hawking a product, they are a robot being told what to say, and whether or not they love the product is in a great question. We have time for one more question in the black. Yeah, that's you. Sorry, black sweater.
Great question. So just to repeat it in case people couldn't hear, she's saying, is there a difference between hashtag ad and hashtag sponsored, or is there a difference between the type of disclosure that's needed for receiving product versus being paid to do the post? Hashtag ad has been sort of seen as the safe harbor. That's a catchy legal word. It's not really appropriate to use because it means something from a legal perspective, but it's been seen as the sort of safest thing to do. It's a catch-all, right? So if you use hashtag ad, you're probably not going to be, no matter what the scenario, you're probably not going to be in a hard place. Also, hashtag sponsored, they're used pretty interchangeably. The one thing I would say is that the FTC has been very clear that they want you to be specific about what's happening. So say that you send someone, can I just pick on your people for a second? Not, like say that Evan
I'll let you start and then we'll...
Yes, but like say that Evan receives, $100,000 to do 3 social posts, but he also receives 3 boxes of toys. If he were to go on Instagram and say, "Thanks so much for the toys," that would be deceptive because he's only telling half of what happened. So while there's no real distinction between hashtag ad and hashtag sponsored, you do have a duty to sort of tell the full story. And so I would just caution you to make sure that you're clear with what's happening.
So I know we're a minute over, so I wanted to say a big thank you to our panelists and to our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully that was okay.